So to start, we'll talk a little bit about the early days of Daddy.
Okay.
Maria Rasputin's dada.
Dada.
So Grigory Rasputin was born January 9th or 21st, depending on what calendar you're using, 1869 in Pokrovskoye, Russia. Yeah, the horniest year, of course. The horniest year of the 1800s, which is a little town in Siberia north of Kazakhstan.
Okay.
Home of another famously horny person, but...
Who's horny in Kazakhstan?
You have a t-shirt that says that, don't you?
When my FBI shirt is dirty. I have that one.
Isn't that where Borat's from? Kazakhstan?
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's what this part of the world's known for,
Okay.
Rasputin and Borat. So when he was 18, he married a woman named, not Borat, he married, his wife was named Praskoeva Dubrovina.
Okay.
And together they had 7 kids, only 3 of whom survived past early childhood. That was Varvira, Dmitri, and Our Lady coming in as the middle child Greg of the bunch.
Yay! We would have got along.
You know, maybe. Matriona Grigorievna Rasputin, later shortened to just Maria Rasputin.
Maria Greg Rasputin.
Yeah. Well, you're her dad too. So she was born March 27th in either 1898 or 99 in the same small town. And most of what we know about Rasputin before the story we all know about Rasputin, as told by the
Beards and the Bozos.
As told by the Junkyard Gang that you listen to. And also kind of the story we all know comes from Maria Rasputin.
Okay.
So that being said, while a lot of what we know are cold, hard facts, a lot of details are from the mouth of his daughter. So while it seems to all be pretty much true, some of the facts are a little rubbery.
Okay.
Plus, about 95% of his reputation, like I said, comes from the writings of the people who hated him and also killed him. And this research really made me, I like Rasputin. I think he's a good guy.
Let's rack up all the people that you like. Mickey Cohen, Rasputin,
Attila the Hun.
You think Pizzagate is cool?
I think pizza's cool. If it's related to pizza,
I'm gonna think it's cool.
Gotta be a little cool.
You think Ty Cobb was a great baseball player?
You know, Wagner wrote some really good music, okay? But like
Hugo Boss, he designed some great suits in the 40s.
I don't know who he was designing them for. I don't know who could afford to buy suits in the 40s, but they were pretty nice. But like, I really challenge you. Like when
you're challenging people now.
Doing this research, I shined a flashlight upon Rasputin and I saw like, well, what's so bad here?
Okay.
Like I really challenge all of you, dear listeners, to think like, in your mind, would you just pull a toothpick out of your ear? Are you doing a magic trick right now?
My dentist used it as a frame to hold up my teeth, but I need a pick. No, I have a toothpick in my hand. What? Wasn't he influencing the Romanovs to do things?
What? I ask you this. What was he influencing them to do?
Crap, what was he influencing them to do? Wasn't he just now
to be a good father?
To be a good father. If I remember correctly, I don't know what he was doing, but wasn't it putting like money in his own pockets and he was influencing him? And like he was what's a tongue worm from what's his name?
Snake Tongue.
Snake Tongue.
Yeah, he's
from
the
Lord of the
Snake
Rings.
Tongue to Sauron.
Yeah.
Saruman. Excuse me, Lord Sauron. You've turned into Huckleberry Finn right now. You're picking your teeth with
what? What? Huh?
If you hear the sound of a fence being painted, you know that it's.
I ain't the one painting it. I got Tom. Tom got another guy.
But if you were a peasant from Siberia and you got thrown into the royal cart, the royal court of the king and queen of Russia, would you not be like, how about a little bit for me?
Sure.
Yeah. So what's so bad?
What's so bad about that?
If you had a part of your body that big, would you not?
If you had a phallus that big.
So now back a little more to Daddy. Let's talk about it a little more. Because even though this isn't a story about Rasputin, having a dad like this growing up has a pretty big impact on you.
Yeah.
So at some point when she was just born or sometime before, Rasputin, the father, started claiming that he was having visions of God and the Virgin Mary, emphasis on virgin. But hey, being a new dad must be hard. Who hasn't? Been?
When you miss that much sleep, you're gonna see something. You're gonna see some religious figures.
You're gonna think that you can stop people from bleeding. You're just gonna think that. So because of this, he started making pilgrimages to different holy places around Russia. And also he went to Jerusalem. In 1892, he spent a few months in a monastery. And after that, he left the monastery and decided, I'm a holy man now.
I hate being bald. That's monks.
I have having hair only on the sides. I want it everywhere.
Everywhere.
In particular, he was considered a starets, which is an unordained holy man who would wander across the country preaching and healing. This is a Russian thing. It's a Russian thing.
You wouldn't get it.
So while he had no official affiliation with the church, he would just go around spreading his version of the gospel and healing not only people, but also animals. Okay. He would just, he was like a witch doctor almost. Like he'd just travel around giving you...
This is his Save the Cat.
This is his Save the Cat, which so many.
so many cats saved.
Every single cat in Russia.
Yeah, he saved, and he's a good guy. That's how he showed in this story, this narrative, that he's a good guy.
He's like St. Patrick or whoever taking the snakes out of Ireland. Mm-hmm. Rasputin took all those snakes and he tied them all together and stuck them between his legs. So he cured Maria when she had diphtheria when she was 7 years old. He placed his hands on her throat. And the next day she was healed. She didn't have diphtheria anymore.
Wow. Okay.
Stop that.
Stop that.
Which is weird, not just that happened, but also because starets were supposed to renounce their families. But Rasputin refused to do that because he seemed to genuinely love his children. Okay. Like that's part of all this. He's painted as this like a demon, like an unholy creep.
He is painted like a demon, unholy creep on one end.
Like Gene Simmons.
The other end is like a hedonist.
Fair.
Okay.
I accept all of that.
Okay.
But he also was a human, and like from everything, like it sounded like he cared about his daughter. Sure. Like he loved his daughter.
You can be a hedonist and still care about your family.
You can be horny and still love people.
You're out there proving it every day.
I've just got so much love.
Spread around to strangers on the street.
Pinching left and right in wherever I was saying I was pinching earlier. I don't remember where I pinch. So Maria remembers him always affectionately calling her little one. Like that's his pet name, call her little one. And one of the strongest impressions I got from hearing about her childhood from her point of view was of always feeling loved by her dad. Like no matter what happened, she always knew her dad loved him.
Sure.
Loved her. No. Sure, her dad loved himself.
Yeah, he also did that too, yeah. So everybody loved him.
Well, he is Russia's greatest love machine. So this refusal to abandon his family, Anakin Skywalker style, was just one indication of the non-traditional practices of Grigory Rasputin. Another was that he was a member of a, let's just say, forbidden sect of Christianity known as the Klisti. Mm-hmm. Do you know? Stop me if you've ever met the Klistis.
No.
So they believed in mysticism and also that the only way to purify your soul.
I can hear in your laugh, like when you're talking about Jack Parsons, I can hear that something nasty is about to happen right now. You become like a little girl in the school. You're get closer.
Greg. Okay, at recess, meet me by the handball court. Yeah. I'll tell you what the Klistis... I
have a book about Rasputin in the bushes. You want to see it later?
It's Maria Rasputin's biography.
Greg, it was published in 1963.
The horniest year, Greg. A year that my parents won't let me read books from. So they believed that the only way to purify your soul was to commit all of the sin out of it.
Cool. I agree.
Their method of choice, group sex in the name of Jesus. So they would have group sex until the cows or whatever livestock they have in Siberia came home. And his wife didn't mind because she said, and this is a quote, he can do what he likes. He's got enough for all.
Wow. Okay.
So
I'm tired of him boning down. Go bone somewhere else. And bone somewhere else he did.
Siberia is a big place, Grigory.
There has to be like a history nerd out there who screams at his wife. I wish you were more like Rasputin's wife. Why can't you be more like Rasputin's wife and understand that there's a lot more of
Dubrovino wouldn't have said this to Grigory. But yeah, like all of these Siberian peasants were just like, taking a shower once every month and just having group sex every night.
Doinking and boinking.
Yeah. So we'll get back to that later.
Okay.
A lot has been said about the magnetism and charisma of Rasputin, but again, it's H.H. Holmes all over again. Like you look at a picture of Rasputin and the only thing I can think of is like him.
Yeah.
Why him? Like, what do people see in that?
He was like the tallest man alive at the time. I think he was like 7'9".
See, there's all these rumors about like Rasputin was this and this. He was probably like 6'3". Like he was just a normal,
he probably had a
normal guy like me.
Yeah.
6'3",
6'3",
13
big dong,
inches, but
a high Mickey Mouse voice,
but with a Russian accent. But I don't see it, you know, like he doesn't look like an attractive guy. And if you are attractive to Rasputin, let us know. Yep. Like, what do you see in him? Because they talk about his eyes, you know, the eyes of Rasputin. But
let's keep in mind that photos from the 19th century were like, how many times do you see a photo from the 19th century like va va voom, Helen of Troy? I get it.
We talked about H.H. Holmes already.
And Billy the Kid.
Yeah, va va voom.
Va va voom. I almost said Bonnie and Clyde. I'm like, that's not the 1890s, stupid
Neither
idiot.
is Helen of Troy. Also, no pictures.
But I could see it in my head.
I could see the way that Homer described it. So what?
Doe. Go ahead. Sorry, I had to.
And Medusa looked upon him and said, "Doe." So he couldn't read or write until much later in life.
Okay.
Or it could be Homer, but we're talking about Rasputin right now. He didn't know how to use a knife or fork. Again, could be Homer. He barely bathed. Could be Homer.
Yeah.
He was a hillbilly. Could be Homer. But Maria and many others, they swore he just had it. Like he was charismatic and he was a showman. He was a showman.
Yeah, ballyhooey. That would seem like a time where you didn't need to know how to read or write if you were
if you had enough
charisma. But if you were like performative enough, there's some people, especially in that day and age before entertainment was widely passed around, where if you
he was the entertainment.
He was.
Was passed around.
I feel like if you could stand tall and project your voice, people are like, that's a star. That's a literal
and
star.
And also, who's looking down on him for not being able to read in 1890s Siberia?
Yeah,
nobody.
That's fine.
You're lucky you have vision still. So he was.
Whoa! You didn't freeze to death. Cool. Sand power. Go ahead. Sorry, I was in that.
Snow power. So he was a showman, which is something that came to influence Maria later in life, as I'll get to. He sound like everything I'm reading about. He sounds like he was Ernest T. Bass. Like he was just a hillbilly running. It's like, oh golly, throwing rocks through windows. He was just like a crazy character. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Maria was raised very strictly and very religiously.
Yeah.
He would make the kids pray every morning and every night with him, sometimes for hours on end, often making them fast. He would, which felt really slow.
Wait, praying makes you run fast? I'm kidding. Go ahead.
So he would also bless her and her siblings personally every night before they went to bed. So now we get to the chapter of the story that we all know and love. Mr. Rasputin goes to St. Petersburg.
Uh-huh. And it goes really well for him.
He filibustered for, that's why ladies loved him. Bust him. So around 1903, his travels brought him to St. Petersburg, where his teachings and his personality started attracting followers of a sort. Some of these people were upper crust aristocrats and royal adjacent, who he made such an impact on that on November 1st, 1905, he was officially, around the same time as your story, he was officially introduced to the royal family of Russia, the Romanovs. Tsar Nicholas and Tsarina Alexandra, they had a son named Alexei, who was next in line to inherit the throne of Russia. Problem was, he had hemophilia, which meant that his blood had trouble clotting, so any injury, even just a bruise, could potentially cause him to bleed to death, essentially. Alexandra had tried every doctor and treatment available to her, who is the queen of Russia. So every possible...
So like truly
every treatment available in Russia, which is still...
Russia.
This is still
very
Russia.
cold. It's very cold.
But nothing was working, so she started turning to alternative solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Lo and behold...
I've seen The Exorcist, yeah.
Welcome the devil in. That's how you can heal yourself. Lo and behold, this giant weirdo from Siberia was going around claiming to perform miracles of religious healing. So in 1905, Rasputin, unwashed, sex-crazed hillbilly from the countryside, was summoned to meet the Empress of Russia.
Okay.
She explained to him the situation, and he met the boy. And over time, Alexei's blood problem started getting better. So Alexandra became convinced that Rasputin was the only one who could save her son. And from then on, the fate of the Rasputins and the Romanovs became a total, you got chocolate in my peanut butter solution, but of death. So
is it said if there's an actual scientific
So nobody knows for sure how exactly his dong got so long. How exactly
did he keep pulling it?
That's what you were asking, right?
Yeah, right.
So he keep pulling it.
Is it like taffy?
Did he keep telling lies or something?
Was it full of pee? They keep telling lies.
So now you're flossing? What is going on here?
I got something in my teeth. I got pizza
talking
in my
about
teeth.
Rasputin getting you so like your mouth is getting aroused and you need to satisfy it some way by sticking toothpicks and floss into it?
You yelling at me? Are you mad
I'm yelling at you for flossing.
Well, I'm not flossing my entire... I have something stuck in my teeth that's bothering me. I can't concentrate. Start over.
I couldn't listen. Who are we talking about? Is this Hitler? Who are we talking about?
Is this the bad guy in Beauty and the Beast? What's his name?
Stop.
Oh, right. No, that's not him. How many times did they kill Gaston?
Oh, not enough. How many times did the Lumineer set him on fire? Be our guest. That's the Lumineer singing it. Okay, so nobody knows for sure how exactly Rasputin was healing this kid. But there are two theories that make the most sense other than he was God. Mm-hmm. So one person who worked in the royal palace suspected that Rasputin was secretly giving the kid horse medicine that Siberian peasants would use to treat internal bleeding in horses.
Wow.
So he could have been doing that.
Sure.
And hey, ivermectin works. So he was the Joe Rogan of Tsarist Russia.
Yeah.
The modern theory, though, is that at the time, aspirin was pretty new and considered basically a cure-all pill. So not knowing what else to do, these doctors that were coming to look at Alexei were most likely giving him aspirin constantly.
And that made your blood thin.
Aspirin thins your blood, which would make it flow worse and make his condition worse. But when Rasputin came along, he told the empress to not have doctors coming in bothering the boy so much, to just let him be. So inadvertently, Rasputin made it so that Alexei wasn't being given as much aspirin and his blood was allowed to thicken back up and made his condition a little bit better. So he might have actually been saving this kid. Yeah. Or he was God.
Hear me out.
I mean, he has the hair, so he's got the abs. So Rasputin's presence also gave the empress confidence that her son was going to be okay, which was good not only for her, but for the boy as well. And the Tsar himself appreciated this, to feel some sort of like, maybe this will be okay.
Yeah.
For all this, Rasputin was basically ordered to live permanently in St. Petersburg. For whatever reason, Rasputin couldn't bring with him the whole family, but he and his wife decided that Maria and Varvara, her sister, would come move into an apartment with him in St. Petersburg, where they would be given a proper education and turned into little ladies.
Little ladies with the bows in their hair.
And lollipops also in their hair. So now Maria is living in St. Petersburg, and with her dad getting closer and closer with the royal family, I thought you were going to take I thought you were getting mouthwash now.
Do you mind if I use my electric toothbrush? Is that okay? Do you think it's going to come on the recording?
Can I use a teeth whitener? So Maria herself started coming to the palace and hanging out with the four royal daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. I keep going in between Anastasia and Anastasia.
You got to pick one.
Or as they referred to themselves, Otma.
Otma.
As they like to abbreviate their names.
That's cute.
Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia,
yeah.
Otma. They were weird. They were like homeschool kids. So yeah, they're going to call themselves Otma. So Maria loved hanging around the princesses because she had never seen life like this. Mm-hmm. Like, she was from Siberia.
Yeah.
And the princesses loved her because they had barely been out of the palace. And Maria Rasputin has stories of the outside world, which was a place they knew nothing about. Mm-hmm. So they all got along. And by hanging out with Otma so much, Maria started getting the same education they did. And she was taught by the royal teachers. She was learning with the princesses of Russia.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
But who were you taught with? Saudi princes,
the mayor's grandchildren.
So back in the apartment, she was mostly being raised by a servant her dad hired, and also one of his many, many mistresses, while he went around spreading his gospel and enjoying the general debauchery that came with his new power and fame.
Right.
He was famously having affairs with not only rich, high society women, but also any sex worker he could find. Like every I was going to say every woman, not just the women, often these women's husbands also.
Wow.
He was everybody. He got it left and right and center. So word started getting around that he was having an affair with the empress herself, but this was most likely one of the many lies told about him later on.
Right.
That's one of the things that's kind of accepted as fact these days, but it's probably not true.
Yeah. He was stinky.
He was too stinky for an empress. Yeah. Women would come knocking on their apartment door day and night, begging to see Rasputin for his healing powers. And the one who would be answering the door when they knocked was our friend Maria.
Wow.
All that being said, Maria was young and was not aware at the time of all the weird things her dad was getting up to. He was also a drunk, but he took great care to make sure that Maria and her sister were shielded from the things he did in his personal life away from them. He kept that separate, and also he shielded her from the craziness that came along with being a de facto part of the royal family. Like, he didn't want her to, think like you're not royalty, like you're a person.
Yeah.
He wanted her daughter to grow up to be normal, unlike him. Again, he seemed to really care about Maria and her sister and wanted them to have a safe, normal life for a Russian in 1905 or whatever.
Yeah.
He was very protective of them, even in usual dad ways. Like if Maria had a boy over, Rasputin would allow them 30 minutes alone in the living room. And as soon as 30 minutes were up, Grigory Rasputin would barge in and tell the boy to leave.
I'm not scared of your dad. I'm not scared of him.
What are your intentions with my father? With my daughter. Imagine Rasputin barging in like, hey, man, sit on opposite sides of the couch.
I'm the cool dad.
I'm the cool dad. Leave.
Yeah.
As he's like, he has like 5 women and 4 men trailing off of him.
He has a traveling harem with him everywhere he goes. Hey, no hanky-panky in here.
Shoes on, Buster. But of course, this chapter of the story ends the way we all know it ends. By the early 1910s, Rasputin, whether intentionally or just by nature of his deepening closeness with the Romanovs, found himself in something of a position of actual power. So this is where maybe you could say he was bad. But I don't know if this was diabolical, though. Like he would give advice to both the Tsar and the Tsarina, and they would listen because they trusted him. As the political situation in Russia started getting worse, Rasputin's advice started becoming political in nature because he was asked for advice. This political thing.
He was asked for advice from the king and queen, or the Tsar and Tsarina.
Please,
sorry.
Don't denigrate their good name.
Don't bring that British crap over here.
So he would even make recommendations on political appointments, which is actual power.
Yeah.
But not like that's what people do. Like why get upset with him about it? That's kind of part of the problem. Why are you upset that this peasant has power, but you're not upset that these other rich people have power?
Yeah.
So now whether or not the Tsar was actually acting on Rasputin's suggestions, I'm not sure, but the people on the level of power just below the Tsar were convinced that he was.
Okay.
They were jealous of Rasputin's closeness to the royal family, and then World War I hit, and jealousy had to be melted down into Russian bullets of jealousy.
They're green.
They're great, soon to be red. So Russian life got noticeably worse leading up to and during World War I, and many people wanted a person to blame for why that was happening. A good many people blame the royal family, which we'll get to in a second, but there were a sector of people who wouldn't dare blame the royal family. But there was clearly something wrong, and what new figure was in the picture that wasn't before Grigory Rasputin?
Found him.
The horny peasant from Siberia butting in on their aristocracy.
Yeah.
So they started spreading dirty and probably false rumors about him, like that he was having an affair with Alexandra. Like I said, there was also one that he was working with Germany to import apples infected with cholera from Canada to spread disease in St. Petersburg and destroy the Russian war effort.
That's true, right?
That's more likely than Alexandra getting with that guy.
He's too tall.
Have you seen Alexandra? She's like Helen of Troy. Helen of Troy. So then they started painting him as the Mad Monk and basically as an evil demon who was bewitching the empress to control the Tsar.
Yeah.
As the war went on, Russia fell into chaos. So Rasputin came to be seen as an unholy force that had to be destroyed if Russia was going to survive this. The first attempt on his life happened just before the war started on June 29th, 1914 by a woman whose nose had been eaten off by syphilis named Kionia Guseva. Weirdly, there is a picture of her and it's frightening. Her? Where's the charisma on her? So Rasputin was leaving church one day when she ran up to him and stabbed him in the stomach, yelling that she had killed the Antichrist. He managed to run away, but she chased him and he ended up knocking her out with a stick, and she was taken to a mental asylum.
Wow.
This left Rasputin in a ton of pain even after he had healed, so his drinking intensified. And that combined with all the rumors spreading around him put him in not a great headspace.
Sure.
But still, he wanted to protect Maria and her sister from all of this nastiness that was going on. He said to her during this time that he didn't want people uttering the filth about you that they do about me. But still, Maria had to hear all this stuff about her dad, that he was ruining Russia and he was evil incarnate, which, I mean, I say that about your dad all the time, but this time, there's some...
He's way taller than your dad.
How long is your...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say beard, but to her, he was still dad, and she loved him. Meanwhile, the war got bad, and the decisions the Tsar was making seemed to be making things worse, and who was supposedly giving him advice? The big man.
Yeah.
Then in 1916, the Tsar went to personally command the army, so he had to leave St. Petersburg. So who did he leave partially in charge while he was gone? His wife. So now not only was the person they feared was most influenced by Rasputin, the Tsarina, put in charge of the country, she was also German-born, which fueled the conspiracy theories.
I did not know that.
This was the last straw for Rasputin. Enter a prototypical aristocrat named Prince Felix Yusupov. While the war raged on and other men were of his standing enlisted in the army in some capacity, Prince Yusupov refused. Even his own wife became a nurse during this time, but he did nothing, which she criticized him for constantly, which filled him with guilt and manly shame. And I was thinking, like, good for him refusing to fight.
Yeah.
Maybe he's a pacifist or something. And then I remembered what he's famous for. So it wasn't that. He was just a coward.
Yeah.
But no way was he going to get shot in some trench. What else could he do that would serve his country that he wouldn't have to leave his house for? That's it. Murder Rasputin. On top of this, supposedly, I believe according to Maria, Yusupov had once solicited Rasputin for a little romp in the Kremlin, if you know what I mean. But Rasputin, while, like I said, definitely into that, he said no to this guy. So Yusupov had a personal vendetta against Rasputin, aside from...
I was horny, and you let me down.
No, the horniest man in Russia said no to me. So he got together with his other rich buddies, the Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich and a politician named Vladimir Purushkevich, and devised a plan to murder Rasputin. Pretty simple. They'd invite Rasputin to Yusupov's house, get him into the basement, poison him. So they did just that, and on December 16th or 30th, again, depending on what calendar, in the year 1916, Rasputin came to Moika Palace under the pretense of meeting Yusupov's wife, who was part of the royal family, but in reality was not home. They all went down into the basement where there was a spread of cakes and wine, so naturally old Grigory went to town. Unbeknownst to Rasputin, all the cake and wine was poison. Yusupov and his conspirators watched him guzzle and gobble, but nothing was happening except occasionally he'd rub his throat. And then at one point he stood up and walked around the room. So the prince eagerly was like,
feel like dying anytime soon?
The light's getting dim?
Yeah. He
said, what's wrong? He replied, why, nothing, just a tickling in my throat. The Madeira is really good. Give me some more.
Oh my God.
So he started eating and drinking until finally they decided this poison's not working. So someone pulled a gun, shot him 3 times. They thought, well, that worked. And then, like Michael Myers, he jumped back up and attacked them. So they beat him mercilessly with clubs and also stabbed him. But he managed to escape the basement, ran into the courtyard where he collapsed. But just to make sure, they threw his body through a hole in the ice on the Malaya Nevka River. So that's the end of the story we all know, but now really begins the story of the soon-to-be LA lady, Maria. That's also the story as told by Yusupov in his book, To Turn Himself into a Russian Hero. Maria's story is a lot less supernatural and a lot more disturbing. Her dad didn't come home when he went.
Yes,
so
he went and never came home.
He went and never came home. So it was up to Maria to report him missing to the police. Yeah. It was then up to her to identify his corpse when they pulled him frozen solid out of the river a few days later.
Solid.
According to her and the official autopsy, there was no poison and he didn't drown to death. He was simply shot in the head at close range and died. That's all that happened.
Wow.
According to Maria and the autopsy. She said her dad didn't even like sweets, so he wouldn't be eating a bunch of poison cakes like Yusupov claimed that he was. What's most disturbing is that she claims that her dad was taken advantage of sexually before he was killed.
Wow.
So it's not as supernatural and heroic as these guys. They did bad things to him and then murdered him. which is also a bad thing.
Yeah.
Then there's also the rumor that at some point during all this, his 13.5-inch perestroika was cut off at one point, which is going to come up, so to speak, a couple of times more in this story.
Okay.
Her dad was buried at the Alexander Palace, but she bitterly noted that very few people showed up at his funeral, not even those who had come to him late at night begging for his help. At some point after the murder, anti-Rasputinists broke into and trashed their apartment. So to keep them safe, the royal family moved Maria and her sister into one of their lesser palaces. I guess this will be okay. It's no apartment. Maria continued on this way, still seeing and being taught with the princesses, and then the Russian Revolution hit. Contrary to what Yusupov believed, killing Rasputin didn't stop the crumbling of the monarchy. In fact, it might have done the opposite. It angered a lot of peasants when they saw that finally one of us got into a position of power.
And he's hot.
He's hot as hell and so unwashed. But the second one of them got into a position of power, he was murdered by the aristocracy.
Yeah.
The guy who took command after what was about to happened even said, without Rasputin, there would have been no Lenin.
Wow.
So anti-Tsar resentment was growing and a civil war was brewing. So suddenly Maria found herself shacked up once again with the most hated people in the country, the Romanovs. One day, Maria and her sister went to the royal palace like normal when the empress came up to her and said, "Go, my children, leave us quickly. We are being imprisoned." She gave them, it was either a bunch of jewels or 50,000 rubles, told them, flee the country.
Yeah.
Maria and her sister fled immediately back to their mom and brother in Pokrovskoye, and in March 1917, the Tsar abdicated and the royal family was imprisoned. To add even more insult to injury, her dad's body was dug up during the revolution and burned. And according to them, when the flames hit his body, he sprung upright one last time. Back in her hometown, Maria met and married a boy named Boris Soloviev, who was exactly like her dad, and many people felt was the spiritual next in line to Rasputin.
Okay, weird.
He was there's a lot of weird dad issues that
understandable.
With a dad like that, who wouldn't want to marry him? He was a student of mysticism and had a growing reputation for hypnotism and fortune telling. He also had a growing reputation as a total dirtbag. He claimed to Maria that he spoke to her father's spirit during his seances and that Rasputin had something very important to tell her. Love Boris. So that was him.
Give him money.
Marry him and do what he says. Babies, make Boris babies. So he also described Maria, his wife, as not even useful for sexual relations. He helped a group of royalists in smuggling money and goods to the imprisoned royal family in hopes of them using it to escape, but some say he was just pocketing all this money for himself.
God.
Then things escalated in 1918 when the entire royal family was murdered by the Bolsheviks. But where Maria saw a tragedy of losing her closest friends and surrogate family, Boris saw opportunity. He was one of the first guys to hire girls to pretend to be Anastasia Romanov, who had saying, she somehow survived. Yeah. And he would ask rich Russian families for money to pay for her escape from Russia, and then he would just keep the money.
Wow.
But then the Bolshevik crackdown spread to seemingly anyone associated to the royal family, and Maria's mom and brother were arrested and sent to a gulag.
Oh my God.
Boris, to his credit, tried to break them out, but he himself got arrested and Maria had to bribe the army to free him. They finally decided it was what's he got that your dad doesn't? So they finally decided it was time to get out of Russia. So in 1920, Maria, Boris, and their two daughters, Tatiana and Maria's sister, fled to Vladivostok, which is like where North Korea is today, and got out of Russia. Okay. Her dad, what?
It's I don't know. Never mind. It's a dumb, ignorant thing to say.
What? Why don't Koreans speak English?
Yeah, no. It always surprises me that Korea and Russia are so close to each other.
They're touching each other.
They're neighbors.
And what you should be surprised is how big Russia is.
Yeah, that's what I tend to forget.
Yeah, and we don't even talk about 80% of it. We're focused on really 20% of Russia.
How's Moscow doing? And we forget all the other
What about
parts.
Vladivostok? Her dad was dead many times over, and her mom and brother were stuck in a gulag and never heard from again when she left Russia. From here, they went through Asia and the Middle East back to Europe, where they settled in Prague and opened a Russian restaurant, but quit after 2 years and moved to Vienna, and then on to Paris, where they stayed for a while. Here, Maria raised her kids while Boris worked multiple jobs to keep them afloat. Maria's sister didn't stay long because she got homesick and moved back to Russia, where she died 4 years later in 1924. Some say she starved, others say she was poisoned for coming back into Russia.
Jesus.
Then in 1926, old Boris got TB, a lot of TB in this episode, and he also died. So now Maria was all alone with 2 daughters, no family of any kind, and no money. She took jobs working as a lady's maid, but also seemed to give herself to Russian exiles for money. It was around this time that Yusupov, who had also fled Russia, published his book about how he gloriously murdered Maria's dad.
Right.
She sued this guy for murdering her dad.
I think I know where money's going to come from.
She sued him for murder and defaming her dad to the tune of over $10,024.
I'm suing you for murdering my dad.
But the judge dismissed the case because he figured there's nothing a French court could do about a Russian murder.
Sure, okay.
Instead, in cowardly Russian, cowardly French again, not getting involved in Russian affairs. Instead, in 1929, she wrote her own book called The Real Rasputin to try to clear her dad's evil image. And now for the second coming of that dismembered member of her dad's. Rasputin severed pierogi, supposedly, and also somehow followed Maria to Paris.
What?
Not that made it seem like it was like a slug. It came also to Paris. It ended up in Paris.
What, like on display, like Jesse James' body?
In the 1920s, a cult of Russian women started worshiping this thing and would break off small pieces of it to give to the followers. So there was like, it's like how people collect pieces of like, this is Jesus's thumbnail,
this is the golden fleece, except.
Oh yeah, it's the golden fleece. All right.
Yeah.
Somehow Maria found out about this and was so outraged. She tracked them down.
Oh, was she upset about it? Oh, did that make her mad?
I'd like to see if it's really his.
Yeah.
She went and confiscated it from them. So even crazier, she kept it. She didn't just like burn it or something.
Bury it.
So now we've talked about a lot of crazy things happening so far. Yeah. And it might seem like, how could it get even weirder than everything inherently weird about the story of Rasputin's daughter?
Yeah.
And then also reclaiming her dad's dismembered dong. Yeah. But then it got even weirder.
Okay. Sorry. You said dong so many times that I'm getting sleepy just thinking.
That's your Manchurian Candidate.
I'm counting
word.
Dongs jumping over a fence.
1 inch, 2 inch. So some enterprising cabaret owner in Bucharest wanted something that would draw in a crowd. We're not talking about the confiscated.
Oh, we're not.
So he wanted something that would draw in a crowd. So he contacted Maria based solely on her name and offered her a job as a dancer in his cabaret show.
Okay.
Maria had never danced before, but she needed money. So she said, duh. So now she was touring in cabaret shows across Europe, billed as the daughter of the mad monk. During these shows, she was made to do an interpretive dance depicting the events of her dad's murder, something that hurt her every single time she had to do it. She absolutely hated having to do it. She cried every single night. She needed the money. She had daughters. She needed money. And now, just when you thought it couldn't get any weirder than that, then she got an offer to join the circus.
As like accounting? As like management?
The bearded accountant?
Yeah, the bearded accountant.
First, she was with the Cirque d'Hiver in Paris, and then the Bush Circus, and then with the Hagenbach Wallace Circus, which was second to the Ringling Brothers.
Okay.
But she wasn't dancing in the circus. She was the animal tamer.
Oh my God.
So she was taming animals.
What is it? Okay.
The ads for her would say she'd perform magic over wild beasts just as her father dominated men. It was all just a marketing gimmick. That's all this was. She had, again, her dad was a showman. She had to become a showwoman herself. She had zero experience in this and said, they asked me if I mind to be in a cage with animals. And I answer, why not? I've been in a cage with Bolsheviks.
Got him. Solid.
That was also, she became a stand-up comedian.
She had a tight 10.
So did her dad. So her bitterness also showed through when she said, I am more afraid of people than tigers. A tiger charges you from the front, but your enemy comes at you from behind.
Hell yeah.
But to counterbalance all this capitalizing on her dad's perceived image, she wrote another book in 1932 called My Father in an attempt to set the record straight on her dad. But then the big show came calling. The Ringling Brothers Circus recruited Maria to their show in 1935 and brought her on tour in America. Weirdly, customs wouldn't let her daughters into the country, so they had to go move back to Paris. But the American public was fascinated by Maria Rasputin, like just the name, Maria Rasputin, and her animal taming act. So
it's strange because like how many, I'm trying to think of like, there's no modern equivalent of Rasputin, but you think of a controversial figure.
Hitler. It's almost like, it's like I said, he wasn't that bad, but it's someone who has the last name Hitler or like Stalin or something
and
like
then
that.
It's like, like Josephine Stalin and wow, the daughter of Stalin's here. Like,
or even just like, oh God, wasn't there like a famous serial killer who had a kid and like,
oh my God.
H.H. Holmes.
Yeah.
I Holmes. But just someone who like,
I suppose you're right. That's,
it's weird. It's a weird thing that she was in the circus. So she
like that, she's banking on the name of her dad, but she doesn't share any of his traits. She just shares a last name.
What traits did he really have? She was a showman.
Sure.
But she put on a show. I don't think Rasputin could really dominate and hypnotize men. She was just animal training.
Sure.
It was the same thing. He was training Russians.
It's like Dracula's daughter.
It's Dracula. That's the serial killer I was thinking of. So she would pretend to hypnotize the elephants. She even fulfilled every Siberian peasant's dream and got featured on a Wheaties box along with the other stars of the Ringling Circus. Maria Rasputin was on a Wheaties box.
I have that one.
But if you a fine vintage.
Yeah.
But if you had thought someone without any formal animal training doing it live in the middle of a circus could go their whole career without incident, I'm sorry to inform you, you would be wrong.
God damn it.
Not long after she came to America with the Ringling Brothers, Maria was doing an act surrounded by 2 lions, 2 tigers, 3 bears, 2 leopards, and 2 pumas. At some point in the act, she lost her balance and fell down, and a Himalayan black bear immediately charged her and began to maul her. She was barely saved by her colleagues and spent weeks in a hospital, hibernating, if you will. An induced hibernation.
Yeah.
So she did come back to finish out the summer tour with the circus, but once that was over, she decided it's time to retire from the limelight.
Okay.
And what better place to do that than in Miami? Welcome to Miami, Maria Rasputin.
Bizarro, California.
So by chance in Miami, she ran into a man she knew in Russia named Gregory Bernardsky, who is now an electrical engineer. The two hit it off, and suddenly Maria Rasputin's now married to this guy in 1937 and a full U.S. citizen.
Cool.
And now, 6 pages of story in, we finally bring this transplant home to Los Angeles. At some point in the early 40s, the two moved to L.A., and then World War II hit, and transplants had to be melted down into bullets. But for Maria Rasputin, while World War I didn't quite work out for her, World War II wasn't so bad.
Okay.
With all the men being sent to die in Europe, women inherited the factories and took all their jobs, and Maria Rasputin was one of these women.
Okay.
She became a heavy machinery operator in the shipyards of San Pedro.
Whoa.
Maria Rasputin.
Yeah. Formerly on a Wheaties box because she was part of the circus because her last name is Rasputin and now her dad was murdered.
And now she is Rosie the Riveter. She's Rasputin the Riveter.
The Riveter.
So she ran the lathe, the drill press, and several other things that would slice both my arms off. But when the war ended and men started coming back to reclaim these jobs, she retired from heavy machinery. And then shortly after, her husband retired from her. This guy was both abusive emotionally and physically. And then in 1946, he just abandoned her.
You can't treat me like that. I'm a heavy machine operator.
I'm Rasputin's daughter.
Yeah.
So now Maria needed a new place to live. Since the 20s, with the Russian Revolution in full swing, upper-class Russians were fleeing the motherland in droves looking for a new place to call home. And for whatever reason, a lot of them chose Silver Lake. So Silver Lake became a big Russian enclave. Now, in 1946, with no friends or family, Maria Rasputin craved the security of fellow Russians, not that had gone well for her before, and moved to a duplex in Silver Lake at 3458 Larissa Drive.
Wow, okay.
That's where Maria Rasputin was.
So close to where I grew up.
Are you a Rasputin?
Oh, no.
You got to tell me if you're a Rasputin. That's the law.
That's
Rasputin's law. And here she settled into a mostly quiet life in Silver Lake. She did some babysitting and caregiving. She taught some Russian to make money. She'd give the occasional interview for some extra cash, which is where, like I said, some of the details became tweaked over time, either because of her memory or to squeeze a little extra cash out of the reporter. She went to church every week at the Holy Virgin Mary Russian Orthodox Cathedral, which is still there at 650 Micheltorena, even though many people there shunned her because of her evil dad. They didn't want anything to do with her.
You read the wrong book.
No, read my book.
Read my book. Here's 2 copies. Here's 2
autographed.
Yeah.
That'll be $40. People remembered her as very quiet but friendly, but she had 2 dogs weirdly named Yusu and Pav after the guy who murdered her dad, Yusupov.
She could kick him every once in a while.
The ASPCA hated her. Now this is the real bad Rasputin. So she even wrote a cookbook, How to Cook Men.
How to 40 men.
But her peace was disturbed once more when the Red Scare started sweeping through America.
Oh, geez, I didn't think about that.
And of all people, Maria Rasputin was publicly accused of being a communist. You know, the group that murdered
her dad.
not her. Actually, the aristocrats did. The soon-to-be communists murdered the other people she had in her life. She was so outraged, she wrote an open letter to the LA Times that said, I am constantly being persecuted and branded a communist due to my name being Maria Rasputin, daughter of Grigory Rasputin, known as the Mad Monk of Russia. I left Russia 28 years ago and am now a naturalized American citizen for which I thank God every night as I love the United States of America from the bottom of my heart. I wish to announce publicly that I am not a communist, even though my name is Maria Rasputin, daughter of Grigory Rasputin. She also ended up getting caught up in the Anna Anderson scheme, which was when that lady was going around claiming to be Anastasia Romanov. Somehow survived. At first, Maria actually believed her, but I'm not sure if she was just reading about her in the newspaper or she actually met her. But the second she learned more or met her in person,
learned a third fact.
She was like, this is not the girl I grew up with. And she basically confirmed this isn't her.
Yeah.
This is not my old friend. But she still made it her mission to try to explain to the world that her dad was not the guy everyone painted him as. In 1977, she teamed up with Patty Barham, who was the daughter of the owner of the Los Angeles Herald, and wrote a 3rd book about her dad called Rasputin, the Man Behind the Myth. But as we know just from being alive, her efforts to revamp her dad's image didn't work.
Yeah.
He's still viewed as the bad guy. She said towards the end of her life, I love my father as much as others hate him. I have not the strength to make others love him. On September 27th, 1977, her neighbor got a call from her saying she was having trouble breathing. When the ambulance showed up, she was already dead inside her duplex, surrounded by pictures of the Russian aristocracy and her father.
Damn.
She's now buried in the Angeles Rosedale Cemetery. One of her daughters had died before her, but the other one lived until 2009, with Maria's grandkids now living in Paris today.
Oh, wow.
Weirdly, one of her daughters unknowingly met and became friends with one of Yusupov's daughter in school, and only years later did they find out how their families knew each other.
Yeah. I'll ask my grandma I'll ask my grandma, you ask your grandpa, okay?
You want to come over for Russian Christmas? Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
There were a lot of people in LA who doubted that Maria Rasputin actually was Rasputin's daughter, but the evidence is pretty strong, especially considering there are pictures of her as a child with a man who is clearly Rasputin. Yeah. And also, she looks almost exactly like Rasputin.
You showed me the book cover of one of these, and it's like, yeah, that's her.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Like there's even one, she's kind of dressed like a flapper, so it's kind of short hair, and it's like Rasputin without a beard. Yeah. It is so weird.
You can see why Min wanted to sleep with him too.
Now I get it.
Like Bugs Bunny.
Okay. He just had to shave the beard.
Put him in a little hula skirt, and I'm like, sign me up.
Who's this?
Yeah, who's your friend?
This hot mama? But despite the haters, she, just like so many other people who have moved to LA, had her own crazy backstory that led her to Silver Lake. After spending years on the run, she finally found a welcome permanent home in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And now, to close it out, as promised, in 1994, a Storage Wars type guy bought an abandoned storage locker somewhere in LA, and judging by the contents of it, it was Maria Rasputin's old storage locker.
Wow.
One thing he found in there was what looked like a shriveled, preserved, severed, mythical pecker.
Oh my God.
So he nabbed it, took it to DNA plates to confirm what it was, and he confirmed that it was a dehydrated sea cucumber.
Pickled pickle? Wow. That's really funny.